Chers collègues, je propose de commencer notre réunion. Je vais d'abord.
My dear colleagues, may I suggest we start the meeting? I'd like to start by thanking Jean-Claude Juncker, the candidate put forward by the Council to be President of the European Commission. I'd like to thank him for agreeing to meet with our group, the Liberal Democrat group in the European Parliament. And I'd also first like to say to Jean-Claude that we're very pleased at this decision. It was taken by the European Council because as of the outset, at a time when there weren't really many people who believed in the procedure, the Liberal group, this group, along with our two parties, the European Democrats Party and the ALDE Party, took the decision that we would support this procedure, the Spitzenkandidaten procedure, a German word we used, which has now become part and parcel of our jargon. We always were of the opinion that in order to boost and strengthen democracy in Europe, it's absolutely necessary to enable voters to choose directly or at least indirectly the President of the Commission. So we're very pleased to see that following a few minor difficulties from the other side of the channel, I'm not quite sure whether there's any need to actually mention those, the European Council decided to put your name forward to be President of the Commission. Secondly, we're now, of course, entering into the second phase of the procedure, which is approval by this Parliament. Let me be frank about this. The Liberal Democrat group, which is part of the pro-European majority in the European Parliament, as we proved last week once again, we had to elect a President of Parliament and the Vice Presidents too. We want to continue to play a full part in this pro-European majority for the portfolios in the Commission, where we are hoping to have as important portfolios as important as the ones we had in the last Commission, and secondly in terms of substance. And the substance, that is why we sent a document to your staff with specific questions and points following or about the path to follow in the coming years. What we're trying to do is to get from you a break with the past. We had the feeling with Mr. Barroso that he listened a lot more to Council than he did to Parliament. Sometimes we even had very practical proposals from Parliament, which, well, I wouldn't say the Commission wasn't interested in them, but Mr. Barroso, let me give you an example. Economic governance, the economic government package. The Commission came up with an excellent blueprint. Not once, but 10 times, I think, we asked the Commission, the President of the Commission, to submit that in the form of a legislative package, and that never happened because we couldn't reach agreement with some member states. But alongside Council, Parliament plays an equally important role, and we hope right off the bat to have this time around a Commission and a Commission President who have the courage to perhaps even go up against the Member States or use the right of initiative, which is so important for the Commission. Secondly, and then I'll give you the floor right away, we've developed a procedure in which there will be practical questions from our members to you. We, of course, have followed your visit to the Socialists. You survived it, as you say, but I don't know if we'll survive it. this call upon the socialists. Tomorrow I'll be in the EPP, so we'll sort things out then. Yes, I don't doubt it. But anyway, for many years, of course, we worked in this group, we worked as part of the majority in this Parliament to strengthen the rules, the Stability Pact, to save the euro. And we wouldn't like to see socialist and social democrat pressure bringing about the loss of all this good work that's been done by our colleague Olli Rehn, among others. That it would disappear. We wouldn't want to see it disappear from the political arena. So we've drafted some very practical questions for you. A number of our members have been appointed by the group in a preparatory meeting to do that, but I'll start by giving you the floor for your introduction of your programme, which of course has also been distributed to all the members of the group. Please go ahead, Jean-Claude. Yes, thank you very much. My dear Guy, for many of you, I'm looking around the room, my dear friends, I can see some veterans who have been around representing Europe for a long time. And, of course, we also have some people here who will be taking us further down the road. I'd like to say right away regarding the procedure that I was one of those who supported the new method for appointing a President of the Commission. A number of us had agreed that we would go for it in the vote on May 25th through the Spitzenkandidat system. Not a German invention, by the way, a Luxembourg invention, because I was Spitzenkandidat 9 times myself in Luxembourg itself, and I'm very pleased to see that the rest of the world is adopting that. It was high time. Now, people who don't abide by the treaties that they themselves signed and are subject to ratification by their national parliaments said that the European Council, when it put forward its proposal for a President of the Commission, must abide by and take into account the results of the European elections. They did so. Some people took their time about it, but there you go. And I think it was an important time in the institutional history of the European Union, because the European Parliament, in doing what it did, went back to the place that it was originally assigned in the architectural logic of the European Union, and I'm very pleased to see that. Maybe I first of all, Guy, tell you why I decided to be a candidate to be President of the Commission. Not so that Europe could remain what it is today. Why would I do that after so many years in politics unless I wanted to contribute, along with others, to changing things? I'm not the representative of the status quo. I'm not the man who wants to keep these policies and arrangements as they are forever. On the contrary, I want to contribute to helping Europe to develop in the right direction. Now, I believe, and perhaps it's a little bit of arrogance, but I can't do anything about it, that I understand Europe. I know Europe well from a very early age. I've been a part of Europe as a Minister of Labour, with yourself, with Louis, with many others. There's another colleague who's at ECOFIN. I've been doing that for decades now. I've travelled right across Europe as a candidate, like you, and once again I was impressed by the diversity of Europe. It's sometimes a little difficult to find the unity, which of course lies behind that diversity, but there you are. If you could travel around North America, you could travel 3,000 kilometres and the landscape doesn't change at all. In the Amazonian rainforest, you can travel for 3,000 kilometres, despite the fact you're travelling all that time. The landscape doesn't change. In Europe, it changes every 500 kilometres between Brussels and Luxembourg. Again, between Luxembourg and Strasbourg, you will see different kinds of landscapes. And that, of course, means that our mindset is made by the landscape in which we have lived. Now, in the EPP programme, there were a number of priorities I picked up on, and I boosted them with proposals which were my own, really. Having carefully read, if you've carefully read, all the documents, you'll have noticed that there's sometimes a personal note which you may not have seen in other programmes. I think that the main idea behind our desire to run Europe together will be growth and employment. There's no getting away from it. That is basic and obvious truth. Today, Europe will be held to account for the failure of national policies. Europe is not responsible on its own for these policies, social policies, economic policies, financial policies. Everybody acts as if the member states no longer existed. I have every respect for the member states, their governments and their nations. They are not some sort of bourgeois emanation of history. They are there for the long run. If you want to carry Europe forward to the detriment of its nation states, then you're on the wrong track. Europe must be built with all its members, all its constituents. We won't have a growth policy if we simply pile deficit on top of deficit. And if you take a close look at it, you know, the public debt. We can't spend money we do not have. I kept saying this at every meeting in my election campaign whenever I was on television. Each programme worse than the other, by the way, and I won't change my mind. If you want me to say that the Stability Pact and budget austerity are finished, no, you're wrong. I think we need to keep austerity going. I'm against excessive austerity, but budget discipline, yes. In the campaign, I defended policies, in particular the policy of my friend Olli Rehn. Others distanced themselves from what the Commission had done. I defended Council hard because I was a member of it for many years, for 19 years. With many future commissioners too. I defended Europe and its track record and that of the Commission too. But that's all finished now. Now it's up to me, and I will define with my own temperament, my own energy, my own scattered skills. I will define what my line will be, and therefore I will remain faithful to the Stability Pact, which is also a growth pact. The European Council took a look at it just 2 weeks ago, and you'll have noticed, as I did, that the Council, which is there to define general guidelines under the treaty, said that there is no question of changing or amending the Stability and Growth Pact. So it won't be changed. But Council also said that we have to use the leeway that the Stability Pact, as reformed back in 2005, offers us. That doesn't mean that we are turning our back on the responsible policy of budget discipline. That was what we had before, but we must have confidence in the pact as revised. We will do that, and I've asked each of us to describe exactly what Council meant by putting these two principles together. I'm sure we would have had 100 different answers. So we'll see. I won't say when the autopsy comes, but we will see, how fast we can go forward. It's not just about budget discipline, but we must use the flexibility that we have under the reformed Stability Pact from 2005. I think we have to organise growth that is not inflationary but that creates jobs. We can't spend money that we don't have, but we have to try to breathe life into the ideas that are on the table. I genuinely believe that if we progress and set up a digital single market, particularly in the services sector, we can, if we can complete the internal market, we will be able to generate growth and jobs, and our labour markets will grow, the job markets will grow in new areas which have a future. I think we'll have to set up a genuine European energy union to put an end to excessive dependency on certain suppliers. We must create all the possibilities that are out there to ensure that we reduce our dependency on others, that we give a real impetus to alternative sources of energy, to energy efficiency too. These things are important. But of course all of that depends on the know-how of the member states. Europe on its own can do nothing unless the member states share the same basic ambitions, and the appropriate political instruments are available to the member states and to Europe. We, I think, will have to try to achieve more investment in Europe. The amount of investment at the moment, both public and private, is simply not compatible with our ambitions. We're talking about 40% in the countries that are supposed to be ahead. Public investment is now so low in some other countries that we really have got to kickstart the machine for investment in Europe. I'm not so arrogant that I think I can negotiate with the other institutions until such time as I've been elected by Parliament. I will be elected by Parliament. I might have been nominated by the Council. I'm not going to go and negotiate with the Central Bank or any other institutions. Nonetheless, in preparing my work as was necessary, I did get in touch with the Investment Bank, among others. I called the Governor to ask, how much can we make our instruments compatible with the needs we have for investment to kickstart the machine in Europe. Let's not forget that private investment is at least as important as public investment. We must go forward in both those paths, public and private investment. I think that we would be wrong to forget, when we think about Europe, if we were to forget the basic values that have forged Europe and continue to do so. We like to teach everyone. We like to tell the rest of the world how to do things. But we too must put more flesh on the bones of our will to ensure that basic rights are respected throughout Europe. The Charter of Fundamental Rights is not simply a statement of principle. It is a document that commits all Europeans. All of these principles that arise from it must be respected throughout Europe. And I still believe too that the European Union must sign up to the European Council's, the Council of Europe's Declaration on Human Rights. Among the proposals I recommended in the past to both the Council of Europe and the European Council was that the European Union should sign up to this Charter of Human Rights. The Commission at the time wasn't in 2006 was not very keen on the idea. But the Lisbon Treaty has now taken the trouble to state that the European Union should become and must become a signatory to that, and it will be done. There is a mandate, and I very much hope that that is done as soon as possible. I'd like the European Union to be more social, more socially minded, welfare minded, if you like. There are many people in Europe who are turning their backs on the European Union and its objectives because they have the feeling that social aspects are not being taken into account sufficiently. So we must do that in the Economic and Monetary Union and in the European Union. We must take these social commitments more seriously. We must combat social dumping and tax dumping. People tend to think that the Prime Minister of Luxembourg is not in a very good position to work on the tax issues. Let me just remind you that whenever Europe has made real progress on tax harmonisation, it has been under the Luxembourg presidency, in other words, under my presidency. We harmonised VAT in 1997. We laid the foundations of reasonable taxation of savings in Europe. We laid down the foundations of a tax code against unfair competition on tax, using tax measures. So, you know, I don't have any lessons to learn from anyone on that. And often in terrible circumstances, I've had to defend Luxembourg's tax system, and I've defended others too. But there's nothing holy about them. I know them all, the others, just as well as I know my own. So I know all about the details. Be careful on that. We will make sure that corporate taxation is based on a harmonised tax base, so that profits are taxed where they were made and everything will be done properly. I say yes to tax competition, but not to unfair tax competition in any sector of the economy. Countries that have used European legal instruments, which were flawed, that have made use of those, tomorrow will have to deal with tax systems that are flawless. We will do that. We need to be aware that the issues of migration and immigration are of growing importance. Don't go thinking that the countries most concerned by these uncontrolled flows of illegal immigration will be the only ones that have to solve the problem. The problem of illegal immigration is not a Greek problem or an Italian problem, it's a European problem. Yes, as a man in Austria, but we have to accept these problems that that occur around our Mediterranean area. We cannot live with the consequences of uncontrolled immigration. I didn't want to talk just about illegal immigration, by the way. We need to look at issues directly linked to legal immigration too. We will soon be short of labour. It's a very controversial subject in the Council of Ministers. We've got to try to reach agreement on some basic guidelines on legal immigration, and we'd have to come closer together, indeed harmonise our provisions governing our asylum policy. We cannot have these issues dealt with in ways that are in opposition with one another from one member state to another. In one country we have 87% of asylum applications being accepted, and yet the same people submitting exactly the same application file only get 20% in another country. 20% yes in another country. So we really need to bring our principles closer together when it comes to dealing with these issues. There we are, Guy. You gave me a quarter of an hour, so there's a few words, brief words. And obviously, I agree that you're right if you want to say to me we've got to bring more of the community method back into our work. That is what has been missing in the past few years. When it comes to a financial and economic crisis, and Europe has become the epicenter of a world crisis, though there's no real reason why that should have been the case, we've got to act quickly, and I've done so with my colleague, my friend Ollie Rehn. It's as if we had to repair an aeroplane that had caught fire in flight. You know, we had to repair it, but we weren't the people responsible for it. We were way up above the clouds there, and we had to repair the plane before it came down. And I want to pay tribute to Ollie Rehn, who over this period, it was a dramatic period, where we saw the end of the world. We could see the abyss opening up before us, and he's done a terrific job, and I was very proud to be able to help him with it. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jean-Claude.
To start immediately the questions, and proposal is that you do your questions in more or less 1 minute. Then Jean-Claude can immediately reply, and then if you agree or not agree, you can intervene for a few seconds afterwards. And if Jean-Claude has still arguments, he can naturally react on this. And so be a little bit of discipline. I know it's very difficult in a liberal group to be disciplined, but we're going to try to do our best this evening. And I start with Andrus Ansip as the first intervention. Andrus.
Thank you, Guy. Dear Jean-Claude, first of all, I would like to thank you for being here this afternoon and sharing your views about the future of the European Union. My question is about your second priority, about the European Energy Union. Just some years ago, it was common to say that the three Baltic states were like an isolated island in energy meaning in the European Union. Thanks to EU funding, Estonia has much better interconnections with our neighboring countries already, and we can talk about real energy security when we are talking about Estonia. But there is a real need for smart energy grid for the whole Europe. It requires huge amount of money. And we know there is only 9 billion, 9 billion euros in Connecting Europe facility mentioned for energy projects. Will you put forward proposals for an investments program based on both public and private funds for a smart energy grid? Will you submit proposals for a real European energy union and for the rapid removal of barriers in the internal market for energy? Thank you.
Jean-Claude?
Oui, Andrus.
Yes, thank you.
It depends on the contribution the commissioners to be appointed will deliver in that respect. I'm sitting here, a lonely rider. I don't know who will be commissioner, apart you, because you will be commissioner. Yes. Well, and a good commissioner, because he was an excellent prime minister. We worked closely together. So who was a good prime minister, there is no doubt that he will be a good commissioner. But it depends on the exact design of the program the next commission will adopt. I'm in favor of pushing this energy union agenda as far as possible, removing the barriers, the hurdles which still exist, improving the interconnection between the different energy channels we do have in Europe. I will enter a deep discussion with the representatives of the European Investment Bank in order to generate public money and private money, which the attached leverage effect in the next coming days. It will be about energy, it will be about ITC. This will be the main focus direction of an investment program we have to put into place. I would like to take under meditation all the elements of the proposals which have been made by the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk 2 or 3 months ago concerning the energy union. All these elements will have to be taken into account.
Means it also, Jean-Claude, a common acquisition policy? Because that's key, I take it.
Oui, moi, je suis assez en faveur, pour des raisons de bon sens, de nous organiser en tant que centrale d'achat. Il est évident.
Now, obviously, if we combine our energy needs in a way that makes us a key interlocutor with providers, we're going to reduce energy costs. So we'll be able to share it among ourselves. So I'll be in favour of such a kind of centralised buying system. But let's not forget that the energy landscape, to put it that way, varies greatly from country to country. Some countries have publicly owned companies. In other countries, there's a mixed system, public and private. And, of course, private companies aren't keen on this kind of centralised system. But on the other hand, if they get things at a good cost, I don't see why they won't get on side of this.
Thank you, Jean-Claude, you might not remember, but it's roughly 10 years ago when we sat in Strasbourg at Winston Churchill over a coffee, and I was convincing you to run for the presidency in the Commission. Though it was a mission impossible at that time, we are sitting here today. I would not have expected, but I'm not unhappy. Nevertheless, of course, we've got certain issues. You have touched the energy issue. I'm very much in favor of exploring the energy union, but transport would be another policy with networks that would occupy me. And I must say that I don't feel that we have really a functioning internal market in transport. I think we need an enforcement of the existing legislation. I think it's difficult to run trains from one country to the other part of Europe. For once, we can say that the previous Commission or the current Commission still did real policy making, and that is transport, with all due respect to Sim Kallas. So I would be interested in knowing how would you imagine the implementation of TEN-T guidelines, of course the financial means, but also the enforcement of all the packages that have been already in place. And just one side question related to it, to the question of enforcement, and that is administrative burden. I have not yet heard anything on that note from you and in your priorities, and I think that if we would decrease significantly the administrative burden, our economies would have been in growth already some time ago. Thank you.
Yes, on transport policy, allow me to remind you that this is one of the oldest European policies. It's also true to say that for decades, one commission after another took very little interest in transport policy. So much so that the Commission was in danger of being served notice for failure to act on transport policy. We all remember Jacques Delors' commission. He's an old friend. He was unable to push through the packages that he was in favour of. I mean, I say Delors, yes, but Delors actually achieved half of what he could have done. It is under his presidency that a real transport policy took shape. So I would agree with you that continuing barriers should be done away with, but that's not going to be an easy job. because the limitations are very substantial and differences between networks and countries are great. But transport policy and getting rid of remaining obstacles is part of a broader growth policy. It will boost mobility of workers, and I wouldn't like us to in any way endanger the free circulation of workers. Because if you start undermining that freedom, then you can't really defend the other freedoms. So I'm certainly in favour of doing everything we possibly can to giving a fillip to transport policy. Like Guy, I've always argued that we need to cut red tape in Europe.
On smaller issues.
Europe's got to be big on big issues and small issues, we keep on saying. But we've been saying that for about 10 years. It's not true to say that nothing's happened. The Commission wants to do away, in inverted commas, with 6,000 texts or pieces of legislation that were superfluous. The cutting of bureaucracy as implemented by the accompanying Commission meant that there was an added amount of money freed up to the tune of 32 billion euros. So there's no reason at all why we're not going to press on down that avenue. That's what I wanted to do back in 2004. You recall that I didn't want to be president of the Commission in 2004, even though I was asked to. Now I've taken up the baton. The Belgian-Luxembourg Monetary Union may find it difficult to bring around the Brits, but we may be victims, but we're happy victims.
You want to come back?
Just in 10 seconds. Yeah. I think it's clear that the Barroso Commission has made an effort on cutting the administrative burden. I was a member of for 8 years, the Stoiber Group, but honestly, the Commission has run out of steam in the last 3 years or so. And I think that effort has to be reestablished.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Guoga, on next item.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I was happy to hear that you mentioned the digital single market. And I think that's an area where we need a lot more attention on. If we look at Estonia now, they have digital citizenship, virtual citizenship. It's an unbelievable achievement for such a small country to be so advanced. And I think all of Europe should look at small countries. We shouldn't just focus on the big, because if you look at the huge countries, they're very inefficient. The inefficiency is amazing, how far backward they are. If you look at internet speed in Estonia or Lithuania, for example, and you compare it to some of France or even Belgium right here, it's phenomenal. But the digital single market is a great opportunity for people. If you look at the telcos, now we have roaming that's fixed, right? It was a big project, and people can see real savings there. And we must never forget normal, small, real people. That's where the efficiency is all about for them. So where's your comprehensive strategy for the digital economy? And when will you have it? What's the date that you will have a complete, comprehensive strategy for the digital economy in Europe?
It's a question of figures also. We're going to tell you. We got a huge fight with the previous Commission, with Mr. Barroso, about the figure. And at the end, he has allowed 1 billion. 1 billion euro for the next 5 years for digital economy. And we are hugely criticizing that. So what we were looking for you, well, we can give the answer already in your place, but it's you to answer today, is what you are going to do more? What is the figure, really, in digital? Because that has been a huge problem the last years.
I don't have a figure, because the Commission is not in place. You are asking me a detailed question, okay, rightly so. But the new Commission doesn't have a program. I can give general orientation as maybe incoming President of the European Commission, but the Commission is not in place. I don't know about the 27 other commissioners. We have to discuss this in the College of Commissioner. So don't bother me with detailed questions where you perfectly know that I don't have an answer to. Of course, the financial volumes have to be increased. Without an increasing of the dedicated financial volumes to this domain, we can forget about our ambitions, but I don't have a figure at my disposal, nor in my head I could announce. What I know is that we have to remove all the barriers and all the hurdles which do exist when it comes to digital markets. We have too many operators. We have too many regulators in Europe. We have to abolish this system. If we are comparing Europe, the European Union with China or with the US, it's amazing to see how fragmented the digital market in the European Union really is, and we have to remove these barriers. That's not only about money. That's about political leadership. We have to convince national member states to renounce to part of their digital sovereignty. They don't have no longer the right to continue the fragmentation of the digital market in Europe. Everyone is agreeing when I'm saying this. I know perfectly well that when it comes to the detail and when it comes to the detailed decision making, we are facing a lot of national defense lines, and many of them we don't even know. But I'm sure that this will be a tremendous work to be done independently from figures. It's also about rulings, about technical barriers, and so on and so forth.
Herben Jan.
Yes, thank you, Guy. Mr. Juncker, one of the main problems in Western democracies at the moment is a total lack of long-term vision. Short-termism is everything, especially in the member states. And when I look at your priorities, I also see a focus on short-term problems. That doesn't mean that they're small, but they're still short-term problems, like the British question, TTIP, the high energy prices, even parts of your growth and jobs priority. What I find lacking is a more fundamental vision on how to strengthen the European economy also for the longer future. And I would like to focus on two elements. They both have to do with sustainability, but also with the economy. The first is resource efficiency. We are extremely vulnerable in Europe because we don't have that many resources. The only resource efficiency agenda now is more or less environmental, on recycling, etc. What are your views on incorporating that also in diplomacy, in foreign affairs, in trade policy? That's my first question. The other one is on climate change. What are your views on climate change, on climate policy, European climate policy? Because I find it completely lacking in your priorities. Are you willing to fight as President of the European Commission for a very strong comprehensive international agreement in 2015 in Paris? And do you agree that we need a very ambitious European target for that? Thank you.
Jean-Claude.
Je suis un peu surpris par la question.
I'm a bit surprised at this last question. Over the past few weeks, I have stated that very few people have read my manifesto, my programme. And it seems to me that there are still people who don't think I cover a lot of ground in my programme. Now, my aim wasn't to detail every single policy which it would be reasonable to expect us to implement. We are all victims of short-termism. That's a fair point. But if you don't provide problems for short-term problems, then you lack the credibility to develop longer-term approaches to strategies. So we need to focus on the short and medium term, at least to a degree. Now, on environmental policy, in general terms, climate change policy requires special attention. During the economic and financial crisis, which isn't yet over, I always stated that when it's over, there'll still be the climate crisis to deal with, and we still need to find the policies to build barriers, obstacles that will defend us from any climate problems or disasters. The October Council is going to take a number of decisions on objectives as defined. I know, and many of you in this room know here, that it's very difficult to implement objectives as stated. I want the objectives to be far more binding. At the Paris conference, I would like us to make the EU a leader in this field, which it wanted to be in the past. But the main decisions will be taken by the October Councils. It's the outgoing Commission that has to take this stand. The next Commission will do its utmost to ensure that the results of the Paris conference are ambitious.
You want to come back, Gerben-Jan? Short,
very briefly. You look at the Council, but the Council on climate issues is being hijacked by Poland. And there is only one institution that can sort of free this Polish hijack, and that's the European Commission. So are you willing to find a solution to get rid of Poland hijacking European climate policy?
Vous avez une façon.
With all due respect, you have a way of oversimplifying problems. Poland has its own problems. I'm not going to upset the Poles in the Liberal group today. And the Poles rightly have their own demands and requirements. Now, when I was in the council, I heard from the Poles, but really we're not going to sort out this problem in the way you seem to have in mind.
Ja, vielen Dank, Guy.
Thank you, Guy. Mr. Juncker, I'm glad to see you here as the Spitzenkandidat proposed by the Council. We think this is progress in terms of democracy and is good for the EU, does it good. We're talking about questions as to how we can generate growth, how we can give young people, particularly in the South, chances, prospects, new products and services, and opening new markets might be the way to go. So I have a couple of questions. President is saying that this morning you said in the Socialist group that the successor of Olli Rehn should be a social democrat. I don't know whether that's true. If it is true, why? Shouldn't it be the best person who should be the Olli Rehn's successor? Sticking to the Stability and Growth Pact, because this is the central issue. Now, here, do you think that a social democrat could do the job as well as Olli Rehn did? Secondly, in connection with opening up new markets, we have the TTIP negotiations, free trade negotiations with the Americans. What are your priorities in the framework of these negotiations, and what are your red lines? And one further question in this context. How do you want to improve communications on the part of the Commission to regain, to win back the trust? Because, in fact, in Germany there's a lot of mistrust as far as these negotiations are concerned.
Herr Kollege Lambsdorff.
Mr. Lambsdorff, during this electoral campaign, I have experienced a situation in which I was the only person who defended the situation, the only one. And I have actually experienced that the way that the Commission has implemented the Growth and Stability Pact has had a role to play in this. Now, I haven't actually experienced anyone in the course of the electoral campaign who said that we would have to weigh up how growth-oriented policies could be set out in such a way that we can get out of the trough as far as growth is concerned. And as far as Mr. Olli Rehn is concerned, who defended what he's done. This morning in the Socialist group, I said that I was the only one who defended Olli Rehn. I was the only one who did so. And I said that if it were that simple, then a social democrat can do that next. And that will be the case. That's what will be the case. I have been defending the Growth and Stability Pact, and we will find socialists. We know some who will be able to do that, but they'll do that on the basis of the programme, the working programme that the Commission will draw up. The working programme of the new Commission will not be able to be radically different to what the Commission has, the Council has been saying about no changes to the Growth and Stability Pact. So the Stability Pact is the way it is, and is the way that it's been since 2005. And I am not an advocate of cyclical programmes, although we in 2008 and 2009, and when I say we, I mean all of the member states as well, engaged in that kind of activity, and that actually led to debts being accumulated. I mean, you cannot have cyclical-based programmes on an ongoing basis. Now is not the time to be looking at programmes. We have to look at structural reforms, because that can mean that we could have a more flexible interpretation of the Stability Pact, and this is precisely what we intend to do. So I just wanted to make it clear, I didn't actually read any press releases from the press agencies this morning. I say something in a political group, and then all of a sudden people are asking me, what did you actually say? And then I have to have a look and see what it is I actually said. So here we seem to be press-driven, and we make mistakes because we're not taking a close look, a precise look at who said what. I am in favour of stability. In fact, I recall the Treaty of Maastricht and the negotiations. I can't even remember who I argued with about when we were discussing the independence of the central bank. And here there were major disputes and spats. And when it came to getting an independent monetary policy, together with Mr. Delors and others, I fought to ensure that coordination of economic policies is something which was taken more seriously. I mean, today everybody's talking about economic governance. What we proposed is that that should be written into the treaty rather than not in an effort to weaken monetary policy, but because we wanted to strengthen, to bolster the economic and monetary union. So as far as the United States of America and our negotiations are concerned, I would like these negotiations to be as fair and transparent as possible. We need greater transparency. That's what I've been saying. And I will look at this issue of transparency, and the European Parliament's consent will be needed at a later stage if we're going to have this free trade agreement. I don't think the data protection can be part of that negotiation. If we're talking about doing business, we have to stick to European rules irrespective of where the company actually comes from. So our rules have to be respected. They can't be put up for discussion. The same is true of health protection for workers and consumer protection. These are all topics which can't be the object of cherry picking on the part of the Americans. So we have to do what we have promised. We have to deliver on our promises. And here, at the moment, I am looking at issues of substance, but all I can say is that the best communication in the world won't help you if the way that institutions treat each other is not improved. In Brussels, we take part in a decision, we go along with the decision, and then we criticise that decision back home. That's what a lot of governments do. So they take the decisions here in Brussels, then they go back home and start criticising those decisions. This is impossible behaviour, and we have to put a stop to it. I've said that everybody is declaring at the end of a meeting that they won. What poppycock is that? If we're talking about winning and overcoming the others, I mean, look at what the agencies are writing and look at the private television stations. There's so many victors in front of the cameras. I mean, nobody wins in Europe. We either all win together or we all lose together.
Encore une fois vérifier.
Let me see if I've understood this correctly, Jean-Claude. If it's a socialist that is in charge of economic policy, they've got to implement the Stability Pact, but that's not clear. It's not clear it's going to be a socialist, is it? Have I understood you correctly? The president of parliamentary groups keep on asking for guarantees that they're going to get this, that, or the other portfolio. Mr. Verhofstadt, no, but it's not settled yet, is it? I'm just describing the sort of thing I'm obliged to see at the moment. Okay, it's not settled yet, says Mr. Verhofstadt. Okay, that corrects what we've heard from the other political groups. Olli.
All you, and then I come later on to Marianne, because I think we are in this important debate on the Stability Pact, and I think you have also pointed this. Eh?
Thank you. Thank you, Guy. First of all, welcome, Jean-Claude, to the Parliament, and very glad to see you here in our group. And I want to very sincerely thank you for the excellent cooperation during the toughest times of the crisis, and especially for your consistent support for the community method and for the reformed and reinforced economic governance. That was very important in terms of turning the tide of the crisis, and it was largely as a result of the reform of the Stability and Growth Pact and the reinforcement of economic governance that fiscal deficits have come down in Europe from around 7% to below 2.5%, and that the level of public debt is now stabilizing this year in Europe, though at a very high level. So that's been very essential for the stabilization and economic recovery, and that is also your legacy, Jean-Claude. In this sense, thanks for clarifying your statement concerning the next Commissioner for Economic and Monetary Affairs. In fact, you shouldn't worry, because I wouldn't be available anyway, because the Finnish government considers me too soft and lenient in that post, because of applying the structural balance instead of nominal targets. Now, we are very much aware of the too high level of unemployment in Europe and the too low level of investment, and we call for a dual strategy. First of all, to boost growth through reform and investment, while at the same time continuing consistent consolidation of public finances and respecting the rules of the pact, applying them in a smart way. So my question is, against this background, what action will you take in order to ensure that member states, also those 11 that are still in the excessive deficit procedure, fully comply with the rules of the reformed rules of the Stability and Growth Pact?
The best way to bring those countries in EDP procedure is to stick to the rules and to apply the rules not in a dramatically different way than till now, but to make use of the so-called marginal flexibility which have been added to the pact when the pact was reformed in 2005. I don't think, by the way, because this is headline giving in all European newspapers, I don't think that there will be dramatic changes as far as the interpretation is concerned. What I'm insisting on is the need we have in our countries to focus on structural reforms. Structural reforms are more important than nominal targets. I do think that in recent years we were insufficiently attentive to the competitiveness-related questions. In our internal meetings at the Eurogroup, we were insisting again and again on the need to have a balanced development between wage development and productivity development, but this was not really brought to the outside world in a sufficient way. So my answer is structural reforms are of huge importance. Nominal targets are important, but they are not as important as structural reforms really are.
Marianne, I can ask all the members to do it in 1 minute, please. Your question, your remark and your question. Marianne?
Thank you, Guy. And first of all, I'm very happy to welcome you, Mr. Juncker, to the ALDE Group and to listen to what you have to say to us. Just less than 24 hours after the election of the Commission President, the Commission itself will present a communication on youth employment, and I don't need to quote the facts and figures to you to underline the enormity of the situation in many Member States as regards youth unemployment. And I think European citizens expect the Parliament and the Commission to move quickly on this. So my first question is, what specific actions will you take to improve labour market access for young people and also ensure full take-up of the Youth Guarantee Fund? Now, my second question also relates to my main committee, which is Employment and Social Affairs. Just a few moments ago, you stated that we must take our social commitments more seriously, and I'd like to know what actions you propose to take in order to take our social commitments more seriously. Thank you.
Jean-Claude?
Je voudrais d'abord vous dire,
Madam, first of all, let me say that we shouldn't make promises that we can't deliver on. The European Parliament and the Commission shouldn't or aren't going to create a single job on their own. We can put in place a general macroeconomic conditions and framework that will allow Europe to start growing far more so than it is at the moment. But let's not give the impression that in 5 years' time the Parliament or the Commission will have put an end to mass unemployment. We simply cannot do that. I really don't like this idea of Europe, that Europe is responsible for everything. There are national governments too out there, and it is they who are charged with implementing employment policies. The European Union can make available tools and instruments to support them, but the policies themselves are the responsibility of national governments. The national governments can't say, look, Europe will sort out the unemployment problem. Well, no, they've got to act, but it is for Europe to make available European instruments to governments such as they need. Yes, mass youth unemployment is a very grave concern indeed. We're going to, or 6 billion are going to be made available for Youth Guarantee Fund. I think first of all we need to also spend the money that's available. I think only 2 governments have taken up the money, and actually this obtains for the structural funds too. Very little of the structural funds have been implemented. Let's earn respect by implementing the policies we've decided. There are 6 billion which haven't been used. What do you want new programs for if existing programs aren't being implemented by national governments? I think we need to agree that there is a need for a real digital market. But on services, if we were to complete the internal market, that would be a good thing. If we had investment plans that would allow us to act in transport, in telematics, telecommunication, then growth would be an immediate result, and it will lead to appreciable job creation. So what we need is an overarching policy rather than becoming victim of a tunnel vision on particular policies.
Oui. Jean-Claude.
Jean-Claude. I have to say that it is with a degree of fear that I broached the topic of taxation. When I heard you, I got the feeling that it might be a bit threatening to start talking about what happens in the Grand Duchy. I know some things happen there in Luxembourg and you prefer to keep it quiet.
Une question.
Anyway, a question which is unrelated to taxation in Luxembourg. I've heard you, yes to tax competition, but no to unfair tax competition. I also believe that you're in favour of some kind of tax convergence. Can you confirm that you want some kind of convergence of tax bases? If so, in what areas? In the Eurozone, or do you mean for the EU as a whole? And this is something that was much discussed during the election campaign. Secondly, FATCA, the American system which obliges banks to pass on information to American banks to give information about American citizens, but not just American citizens, but that of other nationals that may have interest in the United States, and they could be punished under American law even if they are not on American soil. Do you feel such a system is compatible with European legislation, or do you think we ought to develop a system in Europe which would put an end to certain types of tax avoidance? I think my fears haven't been confirmed, so I look forward to your answer.
Depuis des siècles.
For centuries, you, me, Jean and I have been talking about taxation. And for once, for the first time, we agree. I rolled out the necessary reforms in my own country. And I feel I should repeat that we need to do something about company tax. There are proposals that have been submitted to Council on a common base. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on that, but I'd like Council to do something about adopting this text. The proposal remains open. It will mean European companies will have to level out tax differences between member states. A collective effort will be required to take a look at the necessary solutions to the current disparate state of affairs. What prevails? It's business interests rather than the interests of the Treasury. I'd like us to make progress on this. I certainly don't intend to withdraw the text on tax. Neither do I intend to withdraw the financial transaction tax text. They're going to work on this through enhanced cooperation in Council, but they need to discuss a factor. Yes, indeed. I find the American initiative extraordinary. Mr. Juncker talked about the United States of Europe, not the United States of America, but corrected himself. It's Mr. Verhofstadt who likes to talk about that sort of thing, jokes Mr. Juncker. As Prime Minister, if I'd said something about this, everyone in the European Party said, look at the Luxembourgers, you wanted that kind of thing, live with it.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Mr. Juncker. I think what we've heard from you is there are two excellent surprises in it. First of all, the heads of state and government who have signed the treaty are sometimes even willing to actually abide by them. You said that yourself when you were one of the Spitzen candidates. Secondly, it may even come about that we have someone at the head of the Commission who knows what the community method is. Very good surprises. A couple of more targeted questions on bank issues. The previous Commission did a lot of work with Parliament and co-decision and with Council to set some rules. And we set up the banking union, as we called it. Now, my feeling is that in public opinion, nobody really understands what it is. Or perhaps it's just, they think it's just a gift to the bankers. How can you explain what lies behind this? And how do you envisage the work that was going to be so difficult for all of us over the next 5 years, because what we have to do is to make sure that all of these laws are actually implemented. In Europe, we tend to pile up legislation, and once it's been adopted, we forget about it and don't, monitor what's being done with it. Second question, what are you planning on doing? And this is vital for some of the member states. What are you planning to do to improve the funding of small businesses? The banks won't, the small businesses say banks won't lend to them unless they have a specific project, and the banks say that they don't apply for funds. There's a lot of rumours about this going around at the moment.
Oui, Sylvie.
Yes, Sylvie. I think sometimes we don't explain things well. European citizens don't really understand the word union. And here we keep on talking about unions. We have a union, an energy union, a banking union, and so on. But the citizens of Europe don't seem to aim that too much, to like that too much. So when you talk about banking union, citizens think it's something that we've made available to banks, that we've produced for banks, but it's not the opposite of that. But what it is a kind of a framework of rules in which banking activity is supposed to take place. We tried to explain centralised supervision. If you try to explain to our citizens that we've tried to sever the link between banks and sovereign debt, nobody understands what we're explaining. I think you have to explain banking union by the simple expression of saying that from now on it won't be taxpayers who will be held responsible for errors made by other people. And now what we've got to do very meticulously is to make sure that the pieces of legislation that have been put in place are applied. At the end of the week, I'll be talking to the President or the Governor of the European Investment Bank about credit flows between the banks and the real economy, and in particular the small and medium-sized businesses. And that is one of the things that will be taken into consideration. I can't make any announcements, obviously, but we need to think about an instrument of that kind. New instruments and existing instruments, which are already available to the European Investment Bank, can be used to trigger leverage for small businesses, because it's true, credit flows, the credit flows at the moment are very unsatisfactory, particularly in countries like Greece, where they don't seem to see the potential of investment for small businesses. Thank you. I'll take the last two questions on the economy together. Ms. Mikhailova first, chair of the Regional Affairs Committee, by the way, and Mr. Arthuis, who is chair of the Budget Committee. Ms. Mikhailova.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Juncker, in your exposé, you mentioned the urgent need of public and private investments. I'm agreed with you. As you said, we have to activate the machine for public investment and to stimulate the private investment. From the point of view of the regional development, it's very important to guarantee investment in infrastructure investments. And I would like to know, what do you think, how do you see the existing savings in the bank best be mobilized for infrastructure investments? Can we use the existing savings for infrastructure investments? Do you see the better role of financing instruments for the effective regional policy, especially in the context of preparation and negotiations of the national partnership agreements of the countries with the European Commission? Thank you.
Merci, Guy. Thank you, Guy. And thank you, Jean-Claude. This hearing will enable us to gauge our progress in tax convergence. Now, it's true, when you were chairing the Eurogroup, I used to sometimes say, maliciously, that, you know, you remind us in the morning that we need to balance our public accounts, and then the money goes into the pockets of Luxembourg in the afternoon. But let's get back to the question. You're attached to tax convergence and putting a stop to unfair tax competition. Well, the best approach is to have resources of your own. Specific taxation, which is levied across the territory of the European Union. A group has been put together, high-level group. What expectations do you have of that group, and what support will you provide to it, so that those proposals can come to something for EU-owned resources? Now, you want to be President of the Commission. The multi-annual financial framework has been adopted for a period of 5 years. You explained your ambitions. No doubt that they will require a revision of the multi-annual financial framework. What initiatives do you intend to undertake to bring about that revision? And lastly, since you are keen on budget discipline, what will you do with the commitments that have not been met? That these are growing from one year to the next. 120 billion euros on December 31st, 2012. And there are there's 24 billion euros worth of invoices to be paid right away. Would it not be a good idea to get rid of that discrepancy between payment appropriations and commitment appropriations? Yes. On the first question, I would like to say to the lady that I'm working with the European Investment Bank and other possible partners to see how we can line up all the different instruments, including those involved in regional policy, to kickstart the machine, as I said earlier, the investment machine in Europe. It's a little too early to come up with a detailed answer to the points you raised. Yes, Jean, you often said to me, especially in the Senate, in interviews, what you thought of Luxembourg tax policy. You shouldn't have done that because all Luxembourg did was to apply European legislation, which was flawed. It's flawed. You know, we've changed on electronic VAT starting January 1st, 2015. We will share the proceeds under the French presidency. Ms. Lagarde back in 2007. We did that, but we made further reductions in 2010, 11 and 12. We've changed our rules, but we can't expect every member of the French Parliament to sing the praises of the French government. Ah, no, in fact, it was the Portuguese presidency. Sorry about that. So, you were all the wronger. Anyway, never mind. That's enough pleasantries. On the eternal problem of these commitments that have not been met and the gap between the payment appropriations, commitment appropriations, I agree with you. But the Commission is not a budget authority. It's the other two. So Parliament and Council will have to talk about it. And I think we should pay more attention and put more care into debates on Europe's budget. The Ministers of Finance are losing interest. The Budget Council is made up of foreign secretaries and secretaries of the Treasury or deputy secretaries of the Treasury and permanent representatives. That's what it is. So, as the finance ministers really like to talk about European public finances, they're going to have to deal with them themselves. And they've never done so up to now. So the whole issue of these commitments that have not been met should be dealt with once and for all. Very often the Commission doesn't have the money to pay its bills. You know, we are the ones who say that we must improve credit flows, and they won't authorise the Commission to meet its commitments to businesses. The Italian and Greek governments have made tremendous efforts to pay the bills they receive, to keep money flowing into the coffers of the private sector. Now, since we're on budget issues and you talked about proper own resources, ever since I studied this in Strasbourg, I've been in favour of Europe's own resources. I'm in favour of this because I don't want to go through those tragic moments again, the real deep disagreements between member states when we have to put together financial perspectives over a period of 5 or 7 years. There will be a mid-term review of the instrument now in place. That will happen in 2016, and I can't second guess that and do it next year because you have to think carefully before you start work on an issue like that. I had intended to ask Mario Monti to go on doing the work he's been doing in his group. I think they've done an excellent job and that Mario should continue. But in the debate on own resources, it's a debate we have to start now. If we wait to the end of the process, we won't be ambitious enough when we come back to this issue. I have no illusions in Europe when it comes to own resources, but it's a debate that we do have to keep alive. And we certainly shouldn't be delaying that review, the mid-term review. Sometimes we've had a mid-term review right at the end of the whole process because there was no time for it. Right, we'll move on to the next policy area, Justice and Home Affairs, and Sophie will start.
Yes, thank you, Guy, and it's a pleasure to have this exchange here today. I did read your priorities paper with great interest, and I have a suggestion to make. That is that you scrap your priority number 5, which is a special treatment for one particular member state, and that you actually replace it with what should be your key priority, and that's fundamental rights. I'm glad you made the reference to the Charter of Fundamental Rights and the Council of Europe in your intervention. However, I would like to know in concrete terms. We all know that there are member states who completely disregard fundamental rights and the rule of law. gay rights, women's rights, Roma rights, freedom of the media, independence of the judiciary. Are you willing to intervene with much more determination and courage than the previous Commission in these countries and be just as tough as we are on budget discipline and competition rules? Question number 2, very concretely, are you willing to propose, as has been requested repeatedly by this House, 12 times to be precise, an LGBT rights roadmap? Third question, last question. You have once made a remark, I can't remember the exact quote, but something like, you like making deals in the dark or something like that. Well, I actually like transparency, and I think most citizens do. Are you willing, as a Commission President, to unblock the negotiation on the transparency regulation, take sides with the European Parliament and fight for more transparency? Thank you.
Yes, I'm often told that I'm a man of the darkness, the shadows, that I do my work in ill-lit apartments. I'm a little bit like you. I've met a lot of people who are in this room in those places. So, I was never on my own in those dark rooms. There were a lot of us in there who were bumping into one another almost. Anyway, some of these ideas are not worth a public debate or a transparent debate. With Ollie and others, I was in the Eurogroup. Do you really think, demagogy is spinning near my nerves. Do you really think that exchange rates, monetary negotiations with other countries, adjustment programs, which haven't yet been put together but have to be submitted, do you think that you can deal with those in public? I refuse transparency, which will hurt the weakest. I refuse transparency when there is a risk that it will harm those who have no means to defend themselves. Apart from that, yes, debates should be public, should be transparent, they should be something you can explain to people, and you'll always find me at your side when you want someone to get things done. But there are some kinds of negotiations that you cannot do in public until such time as you've reached the point where you're going to have some results. Yes, I'll be severe. I'll be strict if the other commissioners follow me down that path. In the European Union we do not abide, but we don't respect people's basic rights. In the European Council, I missed a vote because, it's Hungary. They said to Mr. Nobody asked Mr. Orban, why didn't you vote for Mr. Juncker? Everybody was asking the British all day long why they didn't support me, but nobody asked Mr. Orban. So I'm not motivated by that no, which was predictable, but I want to make sure that the basic rights are respected with the same force throughout the European Union, and I'll be no compromise on that. I will be intransigent when it comes to the essentials, irrespective of Hungary, because there are other countries that are not exactly an example when we talk about those particular issues that you've just raised. Now, yes, people say that Europe should be a little cautious, should not be in too much of a hurry to regulate certain areas. Now, we do start up our legislative initiatives on things like single-sex marriage, transsexuality and so on. I'm in favour of that. But let's ask ourselves whether Europe really needs Brussels, as people say, need to be the one that regulates these issues. Let's encourage the member states to legislate. Let's ensure that in member states too basic rights are respected. But I don't know whether the European Union is in the best position to start up with directives and things like that and family law, which are really part of the national realm. If I'm asked to do it, if Parliament asks me to do it, I'll do it. I took plenty of initiatives in my own country to that same effect. But I'm really wondering whether you think the European Union should be dealing with those issues. If national legislation does not respect fundamental rights in those areas, yes, the European Union should deal with it, but not legislate in that kind of area. Recommendation is okay, but no, not a directive on single-sex marriage or same-sex marriage, or that kind of problem. I don't have any problem with these things, but the European Union should deal with bigger issues. And it's for the member states to settle family law. Marriage are big issues. I mean, I've always thought so. Anyway, well, perhaps we could look at Article 7. We didn't dare to apply it. Will this Commission have the courage to do so? Well, I'm not going to brandish Article 7 against everybody to try to frighten the governments. If it's there, you've got to use it. I mean, in general terms, the Commission can do whatever it likes, but a Commission President who uses all the instruments theoretically available to him is not necessarily courageous. I'd rather go with Article 7. It's Council that decides. And if I know that Council will not argue with us, I'll be fined. I'll be there. I'll be courageous. I'll be the man that, raised Article 7, and I know that what will happen. I'm in favour of application of Article 7, but I'm against a Commission getting involved in everything for reasons of demagogy, and that knowing that Parliament and the Member States won't follow. Well, not on everything. I have a specific case in mind where this group specifically asked you to, it was the others that didn't have the courage at the end of the day. But let me give the floor back to Sophie.
First of all, you say that the European Union needs to deal with all the big themes. I think fundamental rights, including LGBT rights, are the big theme. And secondly, I've listened carefully to what you say on transparency, and I have to say I'm a little bit worried. When I vote next week, I want to know that the President of the European Commission is going to fight for more transparency in the next 5 years. And that doesn't mean transparency every single second of the day in every corner, because the transparency regulation leaves room for manoeuvre, but a stronger transparency regulation than we have right now.
But I'm not in disagreement with that. I was explaining where transparency cannot be applied at each and every moment of the day and of the night. And I was explicitly referring to monetary policy, to exchange rate policies, and you cannot deal with these problems in full transparency. It would be irresponsible to do so. As far as the transparency directive itself is concerned, I don't think that we are in disagreement. Okay. And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that I'm not the Commission. I'm one of the Commissioners, primus inter pares. You should judge the Commission when the Commission is fully in place and when the programme will have been submitted to the European Parliament. I'm intending to do whatever I can do, but fortunately I'm not alone.
I have two questions now.
J'ai deux questions sur l'asile et la migration.
Two questions now on asylum and immigration. First, Meaida Sarnes and then Cecilia Risa. Thank you very much, Guy. First of all, I think that this is a high-quality exchange. If we're going to have European politics conducted like this, citizens listening and watching, then we might make progress with the European Union. No, we may have differences of opinion, but it's a high-quality exchange, and that's a very good thing. Thanks to everyone and to you. Secondly, I agree with you. Europe, I think, should reset and focus on the essential. It should do less and do it better. And that means I have to say that I very much appreciate that you've raised the issue of migratory flows. We're going to have courage to tackle this, but we really need a European migration policy. That means we cannot go in, fortress Europe. No. We've got to use legal means for access to Europe. At the moment, it is asylum procedure which is being emptied of all meaning. We can't go on with that. That means we've got to talk about quotas per country and so on, per profession. We want real solidarity. We want borders that are under control. We need European coast guards, independent coast guards. And third point, it means that we need a real policy of cooperation and co-development with Africa in particular. And I think it's very helpful if you can move towards that, a true European migration policy. Cecilia.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being with us. I'm sorry if we are making you all exhausted this afternoon. No. I will try not to do that. I have read with great interest your priorities and also your 5-point plan on immigration. There is a lot on illegal migration, on border controls, on cooperation with third countries, but there is a fundamentally important part lacking. You are making references to the common European asylum system, but you completely leave out the next step, which is necessary to form a broad humanitarian asylum policy in Europe, and that is to establish legal and safe routes for people fleeing. You can name, for an example, the 6 million Syrians that are fleeing from a mass slaughter, an endless one. There is nothing in your priorities on a proposal to set up, for instance, temporary asylum offices already in refugee camps in order to establish legal and safe routes to Europe, so that we once and for all can actually set a point and terminate this terrible debt that we're seeing, where more than 20,000 people lately have died in the Mediterranean seeking refuge in Europe. We need to combat that, and we really need to save lives. We have seen enough in Lampedusa, and there is actually a Lampedusa going on almost every day. What do you intend to do to actually fight this?
Thank you. Jean-Claude?
Well, first of all, you're not exhausting me, madam. You won't be able to. I've been listening since 9 o'clock this morning, and I find our exchanges are indeed of high quality. I don't know about Cecilia. Now, when I drafted my list of priorities, it's not supposed to be a programme, a platform for the Commission, the future Commission, to implement. The programme will be put together, negotiated and written down once all 28 commissioners are in office, and we will start to deal with the problems you've raised, and which I'm very concerned about, by the way, because I really think that the European Union should be a humanitarian union too, that our humanitarian action should be at the core of our concerns. I think we do need to protect our borders, our external borders, better. I think it's ridiculous that Frontex has a budget of 80 million euros. It's an insignificant amount. I think we should set up these offices, see how we can do this, because we can't leave these people to their own devices, people who, because of poverty, throw themselves into the Mediterranean. We should have a broader-based approach. I think it's scandalous that we don't deal with the problems where they arise. Why are most of the European Union member states reducing their budgets for development aid and cooperation? Only the government of Luxembourg, thanks to Charles, among others, that has increased its cooperation programme, budget, sorry. And Britain is the only one of the large countries that meets the 0.7% figure. Do we really have to wait for poor people to throw themselves into the waves before we really have a European development policy applied where the problems are caused. We must show solidarity with these people. We must show solidarity with these people, but not. We mustn't wait till they reach our shores. We must show solidarity with them where they live or try to live. Let's be more generous with the people who are poor and won't need to come to Europe if we help them where they are.
Je vais prendre et demander.
We've got 5 questions on foreign policy. I'll take them all together because in the paper you drafted, this was one of the chapters, perhaps the chapter that was most developed, most detailed. So first of all, Annemie Neitz, then Hans van Balen, and then the others. Annemie.
Merci.
Thank you. Mr. Juncker, thank you for being with us this afternoon. I read very carefully the paragraphs you wrote on foreign policy as the European Union and Commission should develop it. And I think that your last paragraph is not very clear. You are obviously referring to what you see as the flaws, the major flaws in the organisation of work between the commissioners who are responsible for the various areas of foreign policy or external policy. You think that the High Representative is not playing their role as you would have liked to see them do it. Could you explain all that a little, clarify it? Because given your long experience, you will know, of course, that there are turf wars, as they're known, going on here between DGs and departments, each trying to protect their own turf, and that played a big part in these very difficult issues. How do you envisage structuring the Commission and its various services to ensure that foreign policy is a little more effective than today? Hans van Balen.
Thank you, Guy. Mr. Juncker, if you see the situation of today, we are in an unstable situation. We see the Arab world, we see the internal wars there, but we see also the Putin policy. President Putin of Russia is trying to get grips on countries of the Eastern Partnership, and maybe even beyond. We have had a peace dividend over many years, but I think it's gone now. We should invest in defense. I know of the national responsibilities, but what kind of initiative the Juncker Commission will take for defense cooperation inside Europe, together also with the United States in NATO? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. Javier Nart.
Mire, cada vez que se produce una violación grave en cuestión de...
Every time there's a serious human rights violation, we hear sterile and useless condemnations. Are you going to use the European Union's soft power, which is extraordinarily great, will mean that the humanitarian clause is implemented, COM 2016, and thereby suspend treaties? Furthermore, the High Representative should improve coordination of foreign policy within the European Union. Will he ensure that there is a better link-up between the Commission and the External Action Service? Finally, I read here that you're going to try and reach an agreement with the UK that will accept the UK's specificities. In other words, you're going to cut a special deal with the UK. They'll have a privileged place in the European Union. This is basically an EU à la carte. What kind of privileges should the UK enjoy that other countries shouldn't?
Thank you, Gabe. Mr. Juncker, deepening and widening of European Union is long-standing and foreign policy of ALDE. I do not think that Europe needs any specific rest in process of enlargement. In my country, Croatia, there is consensus, one of you, that accession of Western Balkans countries to the European Union should bring better understanding, cooperation and prosperity of the whole region. Some of the respective countries are in process of negotiations, some are candidate countries, and others want to become candidates. Therefore, I don't think that message how further enlargement will not take place over the next 5 years is not a good one. Question to you, Mr. Juncker, is how will you manage both process and expectations linked to your position as President of the Commission on the future enlargement of the Union? Thank you.
Thank you. Et on va retourner dans...
And we'll turn to Charles Goerens, so it'll be a domestic affair.
Charles.
Oui, merci.
Charles. Thanks, Guy. I'd like to touch on a question which Jean-Claude has already mentioned, development. The gentleman's lost his microphone. I believe that there's internal and external solidarity. They're inseparable. You've suggested in your replies that they are indeed inseparable, internal, external solidarity. What I'm rather struck by is that since time immemorial, we seem to be agreeing on a 0.7% of GDP funding for development. How are we going to make next year the European Year for Development if this headline objective is not achieved? How are we going to see to it that this promise is delivered on? 4 member states have delivered on it. One can do it. Another country that you mentioned that doesn't have the wherewithal but is doing its utmost. This was something negotiated by Louis Michel under the Luxembourgish presidency, by the way. This committed the member states, the parliament, and the commission. So what can we do for us not to look really bad next year, even though we want to bandy about big principles? Jean-Claude. Let me begin with Charles' question, which is about the Millennium Goals. Indeed, we're not leading by example on this. We've solemnly stated these objectives and repeated them in the Council of March 2005. And the Member States took a decision, and they took it collectively, and I think they should perhaps revisit this because of this important date coming up. They need to deliver on these objectives. They're their objectives. I really don't want this to be a dead letter. I quite often get the feeling these solemn commitments are just fine-sounding words which don't really lead to much in the way of action. We're a bit weak on delivering. I don't want a special relationship with the UK. I'm a realist. I said to my priorities, I want a fair deal with Britain. Who wouldn't want a fair deal with Britain? If we believe that the EU should have the UK as an active and constructive member, then we need to take account of the desires of our British colleagues. I'm not familiar with the details of this. I've never seen a clear list of the kind of thing that the British government wants. But the British government isn't alone on this. The Dutch have a 53-point list. It's not just the Brits. It's at the very heart of Benelux that there are certain requirements. If you want to be realistic and move forward, we need to take account of people's concerns, particularly given the way they were discussed. And we want to discuss with all our friends, particularly our British friends. But obviously there are certain limits. I'm not going to call into question the four fundamental freedoms. I am not going to undermine the fundamental provisions of the internal market. And I don't want this to be a debate just based on repatriation, that's it. We need to look at things carefully and in detail. When we get a list of desiderata, but I don't want any blockages. Neither do I want blockages from others when we want to make progress. If the Eurozone countries want to improve economic policy coordination, so be it. If we want to incorporate intergovernmental arrangements into the treaties, I don't want people to stand in our way. I want us to be able to act, even if others do not wish to do so. That I like what I've stated to be understood in these terms. I can't reply in detail to the questions you asked me about the External Action Service. I'm just on the learning curve at the moment. Or rather, I will do so, or I might do so. I am aware of a degree of competence tussles between different services. I'll play a role as referee, but I'm not going to get embroiled in the details of this. I'm here to engage in politics, not to regulate bureaucracy. Now, I have no criticisms of the current Commissioner, by the way. Obviously, you can be critical. I mean, I have to say, foreign affairs ministers didn't give her the easiest task in the world, did they? I don't know who could do better. Now, enlargement is a genuine issue. Like others, I said they're not going to be any enlargements over the next 5 years, and I continue to believe that. Not just because there's enlargement fatigue, but it's simply because I don't think there's any country that is ready after tough, in-depth negotiations over the next 5 years. Periods when I said there'll be no enlargement, I'm not saying that's it on enlargement, that we'll put a stop to enlargement. It's just a realistic reflection of what is feasible and doable over the next 5 years. Now, obviously, the Western Balkans countries should have the possibility of joining the European Union. That helps keep them alive. This was a sorely tested part of our continent. And we want to avoid any of the excesses that we saw. But let's not promise the sun and the stars over the next few years. We need to conclude negotiations that are currently underway and give candidate status to countries that are ready for it in due course. But please, let's not make unrealistic promises which we can't deliver on. So, yes to enlargement, but no to certain specific enlargements over the next 5-year period. Okay, the last round of questions, legislation and legislative work, and the inner workings of the Commission. First of all, I'll give the floor to Nurka, Nikolai, and Gelka Mende. And Francisco, you get the last one. Let's take these as a package.
President, the better legislation is not only a priority for both Commission and Parliament, but it's a precondition for the successful policy on create jobs and grow, which is your first priority. I have two questions related to the legislation. Will you transform the annual better lawmaking report into an exercise of real scrutiny of the quality of legislation, the legislative process, and especially the subsidiarity principle? It's first question. And the second, what do you intend to do fight against the current uneven implementation of EU law, which is an issue who give the weakness of European Union. Thank you, President.
Angelika?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Juncker, for this in-depth discussion and for your presence here. I think we all agree, especially after this discussion, that we need a new and the next Commission under your aegis that must function and act differently than the actual one. And we need, I think also on this we agree, new and bold policies with a new governance model that is effective and efficient. And what we have experienced during these last years of the economic and financial crisis was that companies with female leadership actually got through this crisis better. Therefore, we as liberals are very much in favor of a gender-balanced commission. And my question to you is, do you share this view, and is this also a goal for you, and what action will you take to ensure a gender-balanced commission? Thank you.
So before giving the floor to Francisco, I'm telling you that all the people who wanted still to intervene, they shall have the floor tomorrow, when we make the first assessment. So I know that Petra, Jean-Marie, and so on have also asked for the floor. They shall have the first on the floor tomorrow when we make the first assessment, because it was foreseen, I have to apologize, 2 hours, and we are already going beyond the 2 hours. Francisco?
Sí, señor Juncker.
Yes, Mr. Juncker, you know full well that one of the consequences of the economic crisis has been the fact that there's 3 institutions have taken the lead, the European Council, the European Central Bank, and a non-European institution, the International Monetary Fund. So my question is, are you going to defend the community method, and will you prevent the creation of new structures on the margins of the treaties? But maybe this is something that the UK is asking for, and you seem to show openness to the UK. Are you willing to use the European Commission's right of initiative without any interference from member states? And lastly, what are you going to be proposing on the basis of Article 138 of the TFEU to create an external representation of the Eurozone, something that the Liberal group has always called for?
Jean-Claude.
Oui.
On the last question. I do indeed wish to see Article 138 implemented. The Commission came forward with a proposal. I believe it dates back to 1998, and nothing's been done about it. I think it's an aberration that the Eurozone is not represented by one individual in the Bretton Woods institutions. I was a member of the G7 as president of the Eurogroup, and this kind of musical chairs was no fun at all. And it's been going on for years, the European... I was there with Ollie. Ollie was there, then I was there, then we were both together, then we had to leave because there was a French, a German, an Italian, and a Briton that wanted to come in. It was chaotic, and we looked silly before the whole planet. The statutes of the IMF provide that the seat of the IMF is in that of the main shareholder. So it should be in Frankfurt because we are the main shareholder. I've always been in favor of keeping this in Washington because it's much nicer in Washington in September than in Frankfurt. But we are the main stakeholder. But our behaviour, what we do, isn't up to par. So I do want a representative of the Eurozone. It will boost our profile and also our credibility. Secondly, I think I've made it clear, and I've told everyone that wanted to hear, that I wanted a sufficient number of women in the next Commission. I don't like to put it in terms of a sufficient number of women. As it currently stands, comments off mic. Gerard, please listen up. You never listened when you were in the EPP, and now you're not listening in the Liberals. Well, he's had 5 years to get into practice. No, look, there are currently 9 women in the college, so a commission with fewer women won't get approved by the European Parliament. So spell it out to the heads of state and government. You won't vote in favour of a commission with so few women. Don't just tell me. Tell your heads of state and government, even if they're not from your party. It's got to be spelt out to heads of state and government that the European Parliament will not vote in favour of a European Commission that doesn't have enough women on it. Say it. Madam, I'm not sure I understood your question.
C'était sur la
It was
regulation. Will the Commission unblock the revision of the transparency regulation and so on? Mais, ceci dit, je vais quand même dire.
Now look, Jean-Claude, the last time around in the previous Commission, half of the Liberal commissioners were women. So we'll do what we can. If we get any commissioners, of course. We can't appoint women if we're not allowed to appoint commissioners at all. But maybe that's something we can chat about on Thursday. Thank you, thank you. You're the man I always knew.
Señor Juncker, ¿y por qué después de tantas décadas quieres?
Mr. Juncker, after so many decades in politics, why do you keep at it?
En tout cas, je veux remercier.
I'd like to thank Jean-Claude Juncker because he's answered all our questions. I think it was quite an ordeal. I think he's due a round of applause.
Et donc
So thanks. Tomorrow in the group we're going to carry out an initial assessment. We'll kick off with members who spoke in the debate. They'll speak first, and then at 9:30 we'll take a definitive decision. No, we'll have a discussion, and the definitive decision will be taken on Monday in Strasbourg.